Welcome to This Organized Life. If you're a mom, wife, or coffee lover seeking advice on how to reduce clutter and reclaim time, look no further than your host, Lori Palau, founder of Simply Be Organized and author of Hot Mess, a practical guide to getting organized. For a lot of people, clutter is their dirty little secret, but it doesn't have to be. Each week, we will share practical tips, chat with experts, and provide strategies on how to keep you organized. I hope that by sharing our stories, you feel a little less alone and more empowered to tackle the areas that are holding you back. So let's get started.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of This Organized Life podcast. I'm your host, Lori Palau. And you guys, I'm super psyched for this conversation for a couple of reasons. First of all, personally, I'm a super fan of John Delony. I've quoted him on the show, talked about him. Obviously, we've had Rachel Cruz on the show. And so you guys know I'm big, Ramsey personality people. But John talks a lot about anxiety. That's his specialty. He's got a new book that is, well, at the time that this drops, it'll just hit the presses. I've endorsed it. You guys, you've seen it probably on my stories, building a non-anxious life. I invited him on the show to come and talk about the connection points between clutter and anxiety. As we've said for years, clutter is just a byproduct of something else that's going on. And a lot of times it is driven by anxiety. And a lot of times anxiety is the result of clutter. So it's a both and. And so I said, with this launch of this new book, this is a great opportunity for us to talk about the book. I've had the opportunity to read it. I was very blessed that they sent me an advanced copy that I've earmarked, as you can see. And as I told John right before we hit record, I bought 6 copies that I'm distributing to my friends and family because I really think it's good. He certainly doesn't need my endorsement, but I'm telling y'all, go out and get it. But just to give you a little bit of backstory, and he's going to come and fill in the blanks. He's also a bestselling author of 2 other books, Redefining Anxiety, Own Your Past, Change Your Future, and got a couple PhDs. So he does know what he's talking about. He's not a fake therapist like me. But we're going to have a really fun conversation. So without further ado, let me welcome my new friend, Dr. John Delony, to the show. Welcome, John.
Thank you so much. I probably would have reconsidered this if I had known you had Rachel Cruz on. She's the worst. She's
horrible. She's so bad.
She's literally one of the greatest people I've ever met, and it's so frustrating. And her husband's amazing too. The whole get up they got going on.
Yeah,
over there
it's kind of annoying. It's like annoying because
she's awesome.
I'm not
Thank
as
you
put together.
So much. Thank you for having me.
Well, obviously, like I said, I've referenced you. I gave our listeners a quick overview, but just in your own words, tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
I am a husband of a brilliant, amazing, super tough woman named Sheila, and I've got 2 kids. I got a 13-year-old and a 7-year-old hurricane little girl. She's like a blender with the top off. And I was born and raised in the home of a homicide detective and a stay-at-home mom that turned into the home of a minister and a PhD medievalist professor. And so I've got a pretty wild upbringing and a lot of chaos. And I've been sitting with hurting people for for more than 2 decades now. We've crossed that line. So most of that has been as a dean of students and a professor and someone who worked with the police department in crisis response stuff. And then the last few years, it has been in this new media ecosystem where I'm sitting with people on a radio show or on a podcast and going out and visiting people and doing work behind closed doors with folks who are just barely hanging on. And so my whole life has been dedicated to sitting with hurting people. And I'm just a dad trying to figure it out too. So you can have all the answers, but when your daughter's like, Dad, I don't like you. It's like, I don't have that. I didn't take that class in grad school. I don't know what to do. Or I do know what to do, but it hurts. Right. So I'm figuring it out like everybody else.
Yeah. And again, not that you need my shameless plug, but, I tell people all the time, like, we're all about authenticity here. And I mean, I wrote a book called Hot Mess because we're all a little bit of a hot mess, right? Like
an autobiography.
Right. I didn't want to write another book with a beautiful, organized, whatever, because I think that just sets people up for like, I can never attain that. Yes. And yes, there is a path through it, but like, we're not all smoke and mirrors. And so what I love about your approach and your style and what kind of keeps me coming back and listening to show after show after show is, you're honest and you don't have you might not have all the answers. You have your opinions and your advice, and 99% of the time, I think it's like spot on, but you also are honest and vulnerable about where you may yourself be struggling. And so I think that adds a level of credibility. And
well, let me say this.
I'm
excited to be on your show, mainly so I can pick your brain with your expertise.
Excited.
As I wrote this book, man, one of the big yikes moments for me is both my addiction to clutter and chaos, to adding more stuff. And I've done the work to figure out where that's from, but also at the same time, as you mentioned earlier, that contributes to the discontent that then fuels my reckless desire to go get more stuff to make myself feel better, which causes more clutter and more chaos. And so this is an area of my life. In fact, the person who helps me with my social media, she got in my car. We were driving up to an event a little while ago, and she said, I've seen your desk and now I've seen your car. How are you telling people how to have a non-anxious life? And I was like, I'm working on it. Right. But this is an area where I'm a wreck. And so, man, I can't, hopefully
I'm here for it.
Conversation. I can leave this conversation with some wisdom too. That'd be great.
Well, let me even take it. I'm going to even take it a step further and say, so just for clarification, and if anybody's new and just joining our show. So when I talk about clutter, I look at it from a very holistic perspective. And I talk about clutter in 3 main camps, but there's really like 5, but I always talk about it. So I talk about physical clutter, which is the stuff that you see. I talk about emotional clutter, which is that guilt or fear. Primarily, this is what it stems from. And then I talk about calendar clutter, which you often talk about, like if busyness is your drug kind of thing, then, stress feels like rest or whatever. I forget your analogy. I butchered it, but you know what I'm saying? So, yes. Or rest feels like stress. I think
and I would add too to that relational clutter. And I got 500,000 friends on Instagram, but like my brain's not designed to handle that. And now the last 10 years, if you look at my desktop, the technological clutter, right? I have 200 logins and 100 different passwords, and they're all some variation of an exclamation point and a 1. I mean, it's madness. And it's just clutter everywhere.
I'll add. Okay. So those are our 3 main ones. Then we talk about digital, which you just hit, right? Digital. And that could be photos. It could be desktop, whatever. Yeah. And then in true Ramsey form, we talk about financial clutter,
financial disaster clutter. Yeah.
Right. And all of these are interrelated, but when I first started, people would be like, I don't struggle with clutter because their houses on the surface seem organized, but they were running around with a chicken with their head cut off. I was, my kids are big, right? I have a 23-year-old and a 20-year-old. So I'm in a totally different season of life, but I started this business when they were young, and I had a husband that traveled a lot, and I was like wearing all the hats, and I didn't have a lot of physical clutter. I mean, I had stuff because, we were involved in like sports and activities, and one daughter's a musician and another one's an athlete and all the things. But I had calendar clutter. Like I was going and going and going. And so a lot of my anxiety came from that form of clutter and setting those boundaries. So it's not just that physical, tangible stuff. It's all of it that leads into anxiety. So,
love it.
So in any event, I love, and you explain it so well in this book, but you really have reframed anxiety as to defining it as the alarm bells. I just want you to, I don't even want to put words in your mouth, but I want you to talk a little bit about that, because I think it's really important for you to kind of define what anxiety is for our listeners.
Yeah. So all anxiety is start, stop, and finish. All anxiety is a smoke detector in your kitchen. Just letting you know that your body's detected that something's probably on fire, that something in your life is not safe for you. And that might be that it's detected you're lonely. And we can talk about that. We're not designed to do life by ourselves. It might be detecting that the nerd word is agency or autonomy, that somebody else is running your life. You're not free, even though you think you are. You're not free. A bank is deciding what you do tomorrow, not you, and not your husband, and not your team. Or it might be noticing that you're in an abusive relationship, or that your partner's pulling away from you, or you're about to get fired. Whatever it is, your body that's scanning the environment 24/7, 365 is trying to get your attention. And in a culture that is addicted to comfort. A culture that has taught us that if you are uncomfortable, whether it's sadness or heartbreak or failure or hot or cold, whatever your discomfort is, it's a pathology. It's something to be solved for and fixed. Then feeling anxious doesn't feel good. And so what we've been told is anxiety is the problem. It's the issue that you got to fix. And so our culture tells us what we need to do when the alarms go off is to climb up on a ladder and take the batteries out of the smoke detector, or duct tape a pillow around it so it won't ring. You can't hear the volume anymore. You can't hear the alarms. And then we're happy with ourselves. We pat ourselves on the back because everything's quiet. And then we sit down on our couch and watch TV and our house burns down around us. And so the conversation I'm trying to shift with this book and just broadly is, what if, and this sounds like a radical question in this day and age, what if your body's right? What if you're not broken? What if there's not something wrong with you? What if your anxiety is exactly right? What would that mean for us? That would mean we've got to look around our house and see what's on fire. And it might be our marriage, and it might be our job, and it might be our financial situation, and it might be not that our calendar is cluttered, but what are we running from when we cram our calendar so full of things? Your body knows, even when we try to distract ourselves from it. So that's the conversation. I don't think that we all got ADHD. We all got OCD. We all got anxiety disorders overnight. I think we've created a world that our bodies can't exist in. And we are really frustrated because we were told a lie that we can do everything all the time with no consequences whenever we want. And that's simply not true.
I love it. I think, okay, conversation over. We're done. But it's so true. And I look at that and then you see the byproduct, the ripple effect in my world where people are trying to keep up with the Joneses. So they're buying the next thing, or they're trying to have, the car, we're going to have a fancier car because our car is old, or we're going to involve our kids in 10,000 things. And listen, I was a mom that had a kid in travel sports, so I don't want to be a hypocrite. Like I did that. And, but we had very strict boundaries, like in our house where I was like, you're doing one sport a season. I have a kid that was voted most athletic in school. Like I have an athlete kid. And we were like, you could do a sport a season, but you can't do 3 sports a season. And that was
even then, right now, I have a lot of compassion. I played travel sports growing up, and they meant a lot to me. And they almost caused a rift between me and my dad that could never be repaired. I think that when something like travel sports, something as simple as that, most people, most of the time, are just doing what they're told. Mm-hmm. And they're told, hey, your kid's great at soccer. College is really expensive. They need to take my $900 class, and they need to travel 6 hours away every weekend for the next 7 years. And I'm going to help them develop into a player that's going to help you with your college costs. And if you don't do this, they're never going to make the middle school team, which means they'll never make the high school team, which means they're going to be a loser forever. And so as a parent, I got a 7-year-old and a 13-year-old. You tell me that, I'm like, sign up. I will mortgage my house so that my kid doesn't get behind. And it's only when you talk to, and I spent most of my career in universities, it's only when you talk to the coaches and they're like, good grief, man. I'm dealing with joint overuse injuries in 18-year-olds that we usually saw in geriatric populations back in grad school, right? It's madness. But same with taking on a mortgage for 30 years at an adjustable rate, and same as getting the car loan. We're getting student loans. We're just doing what we're told is the path to the good life. And if we look around, we've created quite the mess for ourselves. So I got a lot of compassion. I don't hate any parent whose kid's in travel sports. I have some questions I would like to ask him, but dude, I've got compassion for everybody, man. Most of us are doing the best we can with the tools we got.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And it's hard. It's hard to go like against the grain. If you see
hard,
it really is. And again, I'm not trying to like pat my husband and I on the back, but we were, we lived below our means, and we, we have a nice life. Don't get me wrong, but compared to other people that are buying bigger houses and filling their stuff with unnecessary. And again, this is not coming from a place of judgment at all on anybody, but I see the anxiety that comes in between whether it's I'm constantly trying to keep up with stuff or I'm trying to keep up with activities. I'm trying to keep up in all of this clutter that is supposed to, like, you're in this position where you want one of your, and we're going to talk about the choices in your book, the 6 daily choices. We want, like, my whole thing is I want to have peace and freedom. Like,
Right.
I don't want to be chained down, because once you feel handcuffed, that's when my personal anxiety alarms start kicking in.
That's right. Hey, can we address you open the door? Is it okay? And you can edit this out if you don't want this to go on a tangent.
Yeah, for sure.
But as I'm traveling around the country more and more over the last few years, as a society, we are addicted to entering rooms butt crack first. Here's what I mean by that. We have no place in our society to say, hey, my name is John. Hey, my name is Dan. Good to meet you. What's going on in your life? Dude, my wife is doing amazing things and my kids are super healthy. And I just got this awesome promotion at work. We can't lead that way, because what's our first impulse? Gosh, dude, that dude's full of himself. That guy sucks. That guy's the worst. And so even to say, hey, me and my husband made a conscious choice to live our lives a little bit differently, just a little bit. We drive 2016 Lexus instead of a 2023 Lexus, right? Whatever the adjustments you've made.
2015 Honda Pilot.
Or say, right, exactly right. But we've made some adjustments because we put high priority on us being able to laugh in our living room and not be stressed. We put a high priority on us sleeping all night so that we show up for each other full and present. We have no place for that, because it's like, oh, it must be nice. Oh, I see. What a wild society we've created for ourselves, where you cannot tell anybody the joy you have or the cool things you're working on. All we can talk about is our problems. How are you doing? I'm really busy. I'm super stressed. Things are crazy. How's your kids doing? Well, so-and-so's, what if we just all took a stand and we're like, you know what? No, I'm just going to start telling also the good stuff. What a wild world. So I will be somebody who applauds you. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. No, I just, you know what? I don't want it to sound braggy or that I'm
That's for other people.
That's
for other people to choose to interpret, right? Such as their life. But man, good for you. I'm proud of you. That's awesome.
Well, I appreciate it.
And hey, can I make a guess?
Yeah.
Do your kids like you?
One does.
Okay.
One, I'm a lot. You say you're a lot. I'm a lot.
Okay, but in baseball terms, you're batting 500, which means you're in the Hall of Fame. That's incredible, right? Good for you. I find that parents who prioritize their marriage and prioritize freedom and peace in their home, and we can talk about what that means actually later. Their kids find home as a place of refuge and warmth, not a place of avoidance and, hey, I just want to go be with so-and-so. I'm going to go hang out with my buddies. Their bodies, their nervous system craves home because it's a place, the only place left in the world that they can plug back in.
Well, I will say, and we're not going to turn this into a therapy session for me as one of your callers. I was very volatile because I did have high standards. So even though we did all the other things, well, I was a lot. And so my older daughter was, I think she's coming around, but there's a lot of body alarms going off.
There you go.
Mom's a little radioactive in the spirit of full disclosure, but we're getting there. It's all good.
Excellent.
And I do believe that we modeled really healthy behavior in a lot of ways for our kids. So
that's awesome.
So that's all you can do, right? I want to just talk a little bit about how anxiety showed up in your own life, because you've talked about that before on the show, but just kind of paint a picture for people. And I know you go into it in detail, in your past, change your future, but just kind of give a little insight on your own story.
Yeah. I think if I was to sum it up, I could sum it up best this way. My dad was a homicide detective and a SWAT hostage negotiator. He dedicated his life to public service. And there were seasons when my family that lived in a modest suburban home north of Houston that shared one car. My mom and dad shared a car. There were seasons when my dad, we struggled to buy groceries, right? He would put his ATM card in knowing there's no money in the account and just hoping that they would accept it and then charge him the $30 late fee because that's the only way he could feed his babies, his kids. And then he became a minister and a lot of those problems continued, right? And so I put a stamp in the middle of my chest that said, if that's what the public thinks of public service, I'm out on that. I don't want to have a house that's so tense and chaotic from money worries and from just paying basic bills. So I chased money and I chased degrees and I chased accomplishment and achievement and promotions. I was maniacal about it. The moment I went from assistant dean to associate dean, I was saying, what's the path to this? And also, I want to get this job and I want to be a professor over here. I want to do these things. And so what I tried to do is run from that as fast as possible. And I mean, I became a cliche. I just became one in a long line of people who got everything they were looking for. I got the fancy job. I had a salary that my dad couldn't have wrapped his head around as a policeman. I had a beautiful, brilliant wife who was Dr. Delony long before me, and she was a fancy research professor. I had a healthy kid after many years of my wife and I not being able to have kids. And I ignored my body's innate alarm system so long and kept trying to out achieve that discomfort and kept trying to out earn that unsettling, uneasy feeling. And when my body was snapping awake at 3 a.m. or 2:15 a.m. every single night, I didn't ask myself, why is my body trying to protect me at 2 a.m.? I just went and got more meds and more numbing agents to cover those things up. So in one area, I'm winning in a way that nobody in the Delony family tree has ever won. And then my body said, I'm out. I quit. I can't do this. We're going to end up dead. And so the behind the scenes is, man, I've got this great job, this great life, I got my fancy PhD. I've got it all. And I also had sold my house and moved my family into a residence hall apartment on the college campus where I worked. Because I had come up with this weird formula for how the housing market was going to implode for a second time. I mean, it was like beautiful mind. It was madness. And one day I'm walking across campus where I live and now work. And I got in my wife's car and I drove 3 hours away to a buddy who's a medical doctor. And I just barged into his office and I'm like, hey, dude, I'm not okay. And that was the first time I said something out loud. And that sparked a 10-year path trying to figure out what in the world's happening to me. And then as I dug into it, started asking what's happening to my friends' marriages and what's happening to my buddies and what's happening to my colleagues and my students. And my students' parents would call and say, hey, you really helped my son and daughter. Do you mind if I ask you a question? And that would turn into a 2-hour conversation. And what's happening to our country? What in the world? And so really I got rather obsessive with why now? Why all of the sudden when we as a culture have everything? We have everything. We can push a button on our phone and food shows up. Historically speaking, that's insane. We can turn little knobs and water just comes out. That's madness. We've created a world where we have everything and our bodies are ringing off the hook with alarm bells. And so I've experienced it. I've been laid low. I've been buried. My wife and I took a $70,000 household income pay cut for me to go to another university where I could work with a smaller group of students and get well. So I've felt it personally, the pain. My wife quit her job and I still have some shame about that, to help her husband get well. So I've been there, man. I've been there. And I found myself falling into some of these old ruts again throughout my adult life. And so it's just a constant path for me.
Well, and I think, first of all, thank you for walking us through that. And I think it's always helpful to have that context because people just have this assumption, a lot of people, that because you're in this, mental health field, that you obviously have it all togetger, just like I'm an organizer, so my house is perfect,
Right.
like it's fake news.
Let me rest assured, and you read the book, so I touch on this. Halfway through this book, there came a showdown in my garage with my wife, and I say showdown where she said, I'm watching my husband die. And I left the house and I checked into a hotel for a little more than a week. And I had this draft where I was teaching America how to build a non-anxious life. And it was very much me pulling up a bar stool and saying, bartender, I'll have one. And me looking down the bar and be like, hey guys, me too. Let's figure this out. And the book went from me telling you how to live your life to, hey, we're all in this, man, figuring this out, what to do next. And so, no, I'm very, very much in the middle of this with everybody.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so we're going to take a quick break. We come back, we're going to dive into the book. I want you to give an overview because this is going to be really, really helpful. So stay. All right, let's talk about the book. So the book, you talk about 6 daily choices, right? That you can make. Is it daily? I read it. So I read it like weeks ago. So yeah. Is it daily choices that you have? Is that?
Yeah, they're daily, monthly, weekly, yearly. It's at the beginning, it's a lot. And then over time it becomes as quick as brushing your teeth, but it's 6 things. Really, here's what I want to do. Yeah. I want to befriend anxiety. All right. So it's a smoke detector. It's trying to help me out. And it's super uncomfortable. It's a loud, annoying, shrieking friend of mine, right? So what can I do in my life to begin to put the fires out and then to, for lack of better terms, begin to fireproof my life a little bit so that when the alarm does go off, I know what to do. And what that means is I have to make some hard choices in my life to do things differently, do things that are not culturally the way it's swimming upstream, right? It is choosing to go the other way. But really this was me taking all the neuroscience, all the ancient wisdom, my own personal experience of sitting with countless people and saying, if I was to give them a roadmap, like a dashboard of their life to look when they start feeling anxious, I'm going to look at these 6 areas and begin to say, hey, is my body trying to get me my attention in one of these areas? That was the idea here in the thought process. So, real quick, and then you can pick whichever rabbit hole you want to go down. The 6 daily choices is you got to choose reality. You have to choose connection. You have to choose to be in relationship with other people, period. And we can talk about that if you want. Choose freedom. You have to choose mindfulness, which is not an old bearded dude on a cloud. It's choosing to be aware and curious instead of responsive and judgmental. You have to choose health and healing. Many of us take better care of our cars and our homes than we do our own bodies. And if you haven't dealt with that childhood sexual abuse, if you haven't dealt with the fact that your dad should have told you he loved you and that he was so grateful to have you and he didn't, your body's going to be solving for that for years. So you got to choose health and healing. And the last one is you have to choose belief. And we can dig into any of those you want to dig into.
Okay. So we're going to dig in to freedom because I have page 153. Okay. Earmarked. And I'm going to read to everybody. Okay. Anxiety is the fantasy of one day. One day we'll just get around to all those books. One day we'll eat those jars of pasta sauce that no one likes. One day we'll start changing our own car oil or quilting like our great grandmothers. And so we buy another storage space. We pile stuff on top of stuff. We buy another organizing book or watch another home improvement show on HGTV. Meanwhile, our anxiety alarms are ringing off the ceiling because we're suffocating straitjacket by all the stuff. So I could not, when I was reading it, I was like, oh, that's it. There we have it. Huh. Why do you think that is? Like, why don't we just unpack that?
So I'll take the nerd approach first, and then we'll get into the more practical approach.
Sure.
The nerd approach is I think our bodies are designed for scarcity. So for all of human history, you got apples 3 weeks out of the year, maybe. And if you got apples, you ate all the apples you could. They were amazing. They were good. They were delicious. They were a treat from the gods. And then they went away. And then a couple hundred years ago, we figured out how to load them up when they were still not quite ripe yet and spray them with nitrogen as they were shipped all over planet Earth. And then within the last, 25 to 50 years, we can put them on jet planes and drop apples. So there's apples 365, 24/7. Our livers weren't designed for that much. Right. And so we have a body that is designed over centuries for a particular environment. And that's one of scarcity. Get it while you can get it. Look at this. Hey, somebody in the tribe just killed a moose. Let's eat. Let's feast. Right. And so we have that, and now we've got this overabundance. The second thing that I don't think we talk about enough is most of us, if not us, our parents were raised by people who grew up in the Great Depression. My granddad straightened nails because there was no such thing as Home Depot. If the nail broke off, you didn't have a nail. There was no money to go get one, and there's nowhere to go get one. And we forget that certain countries began to fall out of World War II because they ran out of wood and they ran out of gas, right? It was a matter of like my granddad grew up in an era when you kept a coffee can of string and you kept a coffee can of bent but straightened nails because you have to. And then he raised my parents that had that understanding. You better get it while you can get it. If you find a nail on the street, you better pick it up and put it in your pocket. And then my parents were handed this magic wand called a credit card that never existed because debt was a tool to capture people, to enslave people. And we made it a way of life. And so my parents' generation bought everything. You mean I don't have to cram a family of 5 in a 900 square foot house? We can get a 3,000 square foot house and just pay it off over 30 years. I'm in. Sign up. And you mean I don't have to, all of us share one broke down pickup that we're all sitting in the front seat and 2 kids are sitting in the back? I get a Suburban? Sign me up. And so we stopped asking, how much do we have? And we stopped asking, how much does this cost? And we started asking, what are the payments? Can I afford these payments? And so you have a brain designed for scarcity. You have a body designed for scarcity. You have a culture that says, get it while you can. And then they give you these access. And then the third thing is we've got these magic boxes. We are tribal beings. We are wired in to look to our right and our left and say, okay, I'm mostly in step with a tribe of about 150 people. And then we got cell phones. And we are now not keeping up with the Joneses. We're keeping up with every human on planet Earth. And our brains can't deal with that. And so it's always angst. And then we go to the TV and it says, are you feeling this way? Get this. Are you feeling like this? Add this. You know what you need is essential oils and a yoga program and Pilates, and do it in your home. So get your home set. And what happens is over time, we get and we get and we get and we solve. And I'm going to get these clothes and I'm not going to get rid of those clothes because those clothes signal to who I used to be. One day I'm going to lose that weight again. I am. And I'm not going to get rid of these books because these tell everyone who come in my home just how smart I am and what I read one time. And also the other 3/4 of these books that I haven't read yet, I'm going to read them one day because I'm a smart guy. I let these objects signal my identity to myself, right? And over time we look up, and if you know, I'm sure you talk about this on your show, but you can Google the square footage of storage spaces in the United States. We can't even fit all of our junk in our 3,500 square foot McMansions, and we have to go outsource it somewhere else. And so we just have a body surrounded by stuff that's designed for scarcity. So it starts sounding the alarms, too much, too much, too much, too much, too much, too much. And then we also, on the other side of the equation, have a body saying, you better get it, you better get it, you better get it. And those two mix matches are making us all nuts. It's making us all nuts. And we're not getting to the core issue. I love that you approach this. Clutter is simply the fruit on a tree that has a root system that needs to be looked at. The problem isn't in the fruit. The problem's in the root system. You can't pull that orange off and dissect that orange and fix that tree. You got to go to the roots. And if you deal with the roots, it will make better fruit, right? Clutter's just a symptom that you're not all right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love all of that. And I am not, and I'm somebody that's fairly disciplined when it comes to stuff. And the older I get, the less I want. I never would have called myself a minimalist but I was just like, I want to find stuff that I have. I want to not be ashamed or embarrassed to have somebody drop over at my house. Like there are certain values that I have and certain things that I want. I want people to come in and feel welcome. And there were just basic things that I just did intuitively. But even I can sit there and be like, I'm scrolling Instagram because I'm bored and killing time. And this ad pops up and I'm like, now I need this thing that I didn't even know that I needed, which I don't need. And again, I'm somebody that by practice does not bring stuff into my house unless I know where it's going to go and when I'm going to use it and how it's going to live. I mean, my friends would call me the buzzkill of going shopping. Like we would go to like, Home Goods or Marshalls or those places. And it's like, they'd be like, oh, look at this. And I'm like, well, where's that going to live? When you get that, where's this big inflatable? My husband right now we're preparing for Halloween and he loves Halloween. And he's like, I think I want to get this big inflatable skeleton. And I go, really? Where's that going to live after Halloween? And he's just like,
that's a problem for future John. I'm going to buy it right now. We'll deal with that later.
Yeah.
That's right.
But, so I think there's all these other things that are these things that are being fired at us from all cylinders that make it really, really hard when we, even when we're trying to quiet it down.
Well, and for me, like, so we talk about the neuroscience and the nerd part of it, but that's not as instructive for me as the fact that I grew up in a home where all my clothes were from kind people at my local church. And I never bought new clothes. I never had new clothes. And a couple of families broke into our house right before Christmas and put presents under our tree when I was a kid. And that's lodged in there. It was an act of extraordinary generosity. And it also let me know, oh, my neighbors can tell too. They know. Right. And so that is wired into my nervous system. And you know what? Whenever I play guitar in front of people, I'm going to have the guitar now, not the one that I had to put tape over the brand or sandpaper it off and paint it and make it look like I did it on purpose. But actually, I was just trying to cover up the fact that it was not a name brand guitar. Now I'm going to spend 10 times that, and I'm going to buy a guitar so that everybody, when they go home, is not talking about my playing. They're talking about, dude, did you see that guitar that dude had? Because now that's how my body feels safe. And so I have to push back and say, whoa. More junk, buying things that you can't afford, buying things that you don't need will not solve that problem that existed in your home. Then I have to ask a harder question is like, what will, right? But for me, it's not about keeping up with the Joneses. It's about trying to quiet that sense that you're not worth anything because you don't have anything. And that's a voice that's been talking in my ear so long that it's become my voice. And I tell myself that. And that to me is where the roots are, right?
And that's after years of work and self-reflection. One of the things, I don't see a ton of clients anymore just because I'm doing all the other things. But when I used to work with people, one of the first questions when we would have like an intake meeting is I would ask them, what was your life like growing up? What was that? What was your home life growing up? Because I think a lot of that gives context, right? It gives context to a lot of the things of where people are. And so
do you find that if I was just to throw a number out, I would say 90 to 95% of folks that struggle with clutter, that becomes hoarding, those that struggle with clutter, chaos, if you will, with stuff, almost always come out of a home that was chaotic.
Oh, yeah. And again, we've done episodes about hoarding. My friend, Matt Paxton, who's amazing. And he's been on the show Hoarders and he's phenomenal. And he's been on my show a couple of times. And we talk about hoarding specifically, not just everyday people with too much stuff, but actual like hoarding people. Yeah. It's all stems from trauma.
It stems from trauma. Yeah.
It's all trauma. And so, I mean, I think, and that's the thing, the distinction to make of like, again, where is this coming from? And we have certain learned behaviors, and I've seen it go both ways. I've seen people say, I lived in a house that was so cluttered, so I'm going to have nothing. Or I couldn't ever have people in my house because I was embarrassed. So my house is going to be a show place. Or the opposite of my parents threw everything out and I don't have any keepsakes. So I'm going to hold on to every scribble my kid does at preschool, whether it has meaning or not. So I can see it go both ways.
But here's where that's a problem. I had one of my professors once was a trauma counselor. And I'll never forget, he looked at me and was like, hey, we were working with kids that had some really significant behavior issues. And he said, that straight A's is a trauma response too. And that was oh no, because we take kids who get straight A's simply so that dad won't hit them, or so that mom will finally look up and go, good job.
Mhm.
And they'll do whatever they can to be seen. And some kids do drugs and break windows, and some kids are perfect.
Mhm.
And when it's a trauma response, what does our culture do? We give them $1 million. We get them into a fancy college, right? And so
Mhm.
similar, people come in and go, oh my gosh, I cannot believe you have 4 kids under the age of 6 and your house is so clean. That's not healthy. That's not
Right.
good, right?
Right.
It shouldn't be that way. Yet we all go, wow, she's amazing. She has it all together. And I want to sit down and hold both of her hands and say, I hear you and I see you. Are you okay? Right? Because it's coming from the same place. One of them we put in jail. One of them we make fun of. The other one we praise. The underlying pathology, the underlying trauma response is the same.
Yeah. And I mean, again, we could talk for hours on this, but what we have, and we won't, people, don't worry. But we talk a lot about clutter and like the control part of it. And that is, one of my dearest friends, she is riddled with anxiety, but you would know it like I know it because I'm in the inner circle, and her house is beautiful and meticulous, and nobody else can load the dishwasher because she has to do it because it's such a level of control. And we've talked about this offline and, behind closed doors, and really looking at that is this how her anxiety is manifesting itself. And it's somebody else is that chaos, and you walk in and see piles of dishes and papers and everywhere. And that's telling one story, but the perfect house is also telling another story. Yeah. So, yeah. All right. Tell our listeners again, obviously I know they can get the book everywhere. It is out now, people. Pre-sale's over. Go get it. Where's the best place for them to connect up with you? And of course, we'll link to everything in our show notes, but
you can follow me on the internet at John Delony. And that's on the Instagrams and the TikToks and all that stuff. You can buy the book anywhere in any store. JohnDelony.com helps me out a little bit more, but you get it wherever you can get it. You can get Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, you can get it everywhere. So it's out into the wild, and pretty excited about it.
Yes. For Christmas, people, or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or whatever you celebrate, go get it. Stick in somebody's stocking. I'm telling you.
Nothing says I love you like, you should read a book about anxiety. Right? It's so good.
So good. All right. We're going to take one last quick break. We're going to come back, put you back in the hot seat for our wrap-up questions. So sit tight. All right, John. So we always like to ask a few questions of our guests before they leave us. I believe you're a reader. And so I love this question because it's where I get all my book recommendations, seriously, from all my guests. But can you, and you probably have a few, but just a book that has been really transformational in your life? It could be professional, it could be personal, it could be lighthearted, it could be serious. And some people have a couple, and that's fine too. But either something that you go back to or something that you're like, wow, this was really like a game changer for me.
Probably the most... I'll give you 2 books. One is, 3 books. And one of them I read every year. I'll do 3.
Okay.
One is, and your listeners are going to roll their eyes. It's Danny, the Champion of the World by Roald Dahl. Okay. The guy who wrote Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory and the BFG and James and the Giant Peach. Mm-hmm. That book is about a dad and a son. Mother passed away, and they take on the man. But the beauty of that book is the way a dad, I'm going to get all choked up now. Hold on. Mm. It's the way a dad shows up with his kid to do something ridiculous. And Roald Dahl writes James and the Giant Peach, right? All of his books have an air of ridiculousness to them. But there is a story of a dad and a little boy that is probably one of the truest representations I've ever seen. Because your kids don't want their soccer games more than they want you. Mm-hmm. They will play soccer games because that's when you light up. They want you. And you can get them all the video games and electronics. Most kids, most of the time, if you're a safe person, would love to sit and throw mud at you and let you put mud all over them, and they put mud all over you and go fishing with you and catch nothing and tell hilarious stories. Our kids want us. And so this is just it's a fantasy. It's a children's book. I mean, it's a teen book, so it's so easy, but it's just a beautiful picture. The most important, and I would say transformational book for me of all time is I Don't Want to Talk About It by Terrence Real. It's got the worst subtitle of any book of all time. It's The Secret Legacy of Male Depression, which assured that no men would ever read that.
I was going to say, who wants to be like on the subway reading that?
Exactly. I think every man and every woman on planet should read that book. Okay. I've bought it and given it out endlessly. And the other book, it's a book that I reread every single year of my life, and it is Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk. And the reason I read it is it really is a beautiful picture of collectively, if we don't, this is where this trajectory ends. If we don't stop and say, I'm going to unplug and do something different, it's a beautiful, absurd piece, a book about this is where this ends, because these things are going to be channeled somewhere, and with no roadblocks and no boundaries and no healthy relationships, this is where this all goes. And so for me, it's a cautionary tale that I reread at the beginning of every single year, just as a picture of, I'm going to go ahead and keep exercising. I'm going to go ahead and keep treating my life with dignity and respect. And I'm going to go ahead and put in the work so I can honor my kids, because here's the other side of humanity if we don't get this stuff taken care of.
I love it. And in the immortal words of Tyler Durden, if we, our stuff's gonna now I just screwed it up. It was like, okay, Kimberly will have to edit that out. But
it's got that great, you are not your khakis.
No,
and the things you own end up owning you.
That's it. The things you own end up owning you.
That's
yes,
right.
Absolutely. Okay. And then our last two questions. In this particular season of your life, where do you feel the most organized, and where do you feel like a bit of a hot mess?
Oh boy. I feel the most organized in my exercise and nutrition right now. The funny part about that is I'm coming off a season of being very undisciplined, very chaotic, an absolute train wreck. And so my life tends to work in a seesaw fashion. And so I will spend the next 6 to 9 months and I will radically transform the way I feel and the way I look. And I'll go, oh, okay, now I've got that under control. And I'll take my foot off the gas. And where I feel like an absolute hot mess right now is in, quite honestly, in relationships. I'm on the road, I'm traveling. And what happens is week by week, like, hey guys, I won't be able to make that Monday night gathering. I'll catch you next time. I start texting. You get in these text memes that are a mile long and they're funny and they're hilarious, but you stop checking in with your friends and your community. And so you can get real lonely. And I'm also I'm a straight up hot mess when it comes to clutter and stuff. And that's really where I've got my eye on over the Christmas holidays. After this book's out in the wild and my travel season slows down, there's going to be a reckoning at the Delony house with, do I need 9 guitars? 9? Like, Metallica hasn't called. They're probably not calling. Do we need that? And finding that balance. Do I need all these books to virtue signal to myself that I still got value. I'm still smart. And so I've got to put in the work and get the clutter under control, create some peace in my home through getting rid of things, organizing what I do have, and creating a place and a home for everything in my own house.
Well, I'm just telling you, I'm putting it here out in the public wild. Lori Palau will come down to Nashville after the holidays. If you want, work with John Delony and getting rid of that clutter.
Awesome.
So just know the invitation is there. So
thank you so much, dude. That means the world to me, man. And hey, I know we got to wrap up, but I think it's important. I've got all the degrees. For 20 years, I've hugged mothers when their child has passed away. Like, I know how to do it and I know what to do. And also, for some reason, clutter, stuff, cool things, shiny objects are hard for me. And I know that people will look at, I got a good marriage. My kids love me and I love my kids. Why can't I do this one thing? And we tend to wear that as a blanket of shame, or worse, we shove it in a drawer and close it up and it becomes secrets. And there was a chapter in this book that I was writing called The Biology of Secrets. Secrets will kill you. And I ended up cutting it because, as the editor said, like, there's enough nerds in the world, John. We don't need another one. So, but there's a truth to it. So I don't mind coming out and saying it, man. I'm really good at some of these areas of my life. My marriage is great. I love my kids and vice versa. I'm a mess when it comes to clutter and chaos. And that's not something to run from or to shy away from. It's an alarm bell for me to walk towards with a professional, because over the last 40 plus years, I can't do it. So I've got to just be humble with that. Right.
Well, and yes. And thank you for sharing that. And in my book, and I say this all the time, for many people, clutter is their dirty little. I think it's actually in like the opening to my show, but it's now that I think about it, for a lot of people, clutter is their dirty little secret, and it doesn't have to be. It doesn't, yes. But there's so much. Yeah. There's so much there, and it's about, again, having the tools in your toolbox to know what to do, the tactical tools to be able to say, okay, now I know what I'm going to do, and also carving out the time and the discipline and having the plan to make it sustainable for you, because it's going to be, everybody's different, and how they navigate, your process is going to look different.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
Anyway,
well, thank you for your work, man. You give people peace and hope, and you light a candle in a dark world. So thank you for that. I'm really grateful.
Well, thank you. And you do the same. So again, if you guys like this episode, please share it with a friend. This is how our show grows. This is how we help other people. So please click the subscribe button, leave us a 5-star review, and share this show. It's the simplest, easiest thing that you could do for myself. And if you're not already listening to John's show, go check it out. Dr. John Delony. I listen to it all the time. It's actually one of my podcasts that I go to all the time. So true story.
Well, you are awesome. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Peace out, everybody. I'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in. If you like this episode, please spread the love and share it with your friends. And if this is your first time joining us, make sure to click the subscribe button wherever you are listening so you never miss an episode. And while you're there, please leave us a review so other people know that our show is worth the listen. You can also find us on YouTube and Instagram at This Organized Life Podcast. And if you'd like to connect with us, you can head on over to our website at simply the letter B like boy organized.com, which is filled with tons of resources, including free downloads, checklists, links to our amazing organizing partners, and all of our digital offerings. I'll see you next week for another episode of This Organized Life.